Okay, so I am bringing in each file individually, rotating it, playing with its scale. I can even right-click and play with whether I flip it or not. And each time I drag and drop something in, it gives me this, what's called a transform box, which allows me to do that. But it also saves it as a separate layer. And we're going to start erasing out from them and making them all kind of transparent, or at least the white's transparent. This one looks pretty different. So I might even do something in what's called layer styles to thicken its lines a little bit. But that's optional. I like it though, because I don't recognize it. All right, so I have 5 layers now. Actually, I have 6 layers because I have a blank background layer. So in order to make them see-through, I have to change the blending mode of each layer. Yeah, Matt. Say it again. You can try a lot of different ones will work. The one that's going to work best for everybody is just called multiply, if we're using just black line work. So what multiply does is it turns something that's on like a white piece of paper into a classroom overhead transparency, so that anything that's darker than white will come through. And it will layer with everything else. So I'm going to turn all my layers to multiply mode. And then you see it looks like a big mess. It's certainly a lot harder to tell what's there. And then I can turn my layers off again, just with the eyeball. So I'm going to turn all the layers off except for my first one. And now I want to start editing, getting rid of stuff. And we're not going to use the eraser, because we're going to use selection tools and then just the delete key, just so you get used to that. It's very clean. So the first thing I want to do is select this chunk here and delete that. But if I just hit delete, I'm on the right layer, it will give me an error message. And that's because we brought them from the desktop. This layer is actually referencing back to this original file. So in order to have Photoshop be able to edit this layer, actually get rid of pixels, I have to right-click the layer and say rasterize. And then it will get rid of that little smart layer icon in the window. So go ahead and rasterize all of your layers once they're the size you want. And then you can start editing, circling things with your lasso and then deleting. I'm going to get rid of his eyes. And because I have so much content, I don't even need to worry about being particularly clean about it. And it doesn't really matter which layer is on top of which, because they're all going to be see-through. I'm going to get rid of his smile here. His nose is a pretty big focal point. I might get rid of that whole thing. I am not painting with white. I am not adding pixels. I am just circling and deleting, taking away, like Arturo Herrera's scissors or an X-Acto knife. If you need to zoom in, use Command+, and you can get more exact about it. But this is an exercise. We're not going for technical perfection yet. Just practicing these concepts. Layer management. You might even be a little bit more arbitrary about it and do just kind of a slash and burn. So, woo, delete.
How do you cut it?
So you simply use the lasso, the standard lasso. You circle something. It will contain itself. It will have marching ants, and then you hit the delete button. Now, you cannot delete if you're a background layer. So if I'm the background layer and I try to delete, it won't let me delete because the background layer needs to be filled up with something. Instead, I have to fill it with something. But that's why we brought them in as layers above the background. Okay. Let me come and see. Now I've edited my first layer, I move on to my second. And I need to make sure that the layer is selected, kind of glowing in gray here. I've already rasterized it, so now I can delete. And I want to get rid of recognizable stuff, like the eyes. I like to have each layer showing one by one. So now I see this OD line coming through. And I'm going to kind of celebrate that line. Whoops. And make it look more intentional with the other lines. And if there's something that just doesn't fit, I'm going to delete it. Or if there's something that's too easily recognizable, like maybe Garfield's smirk and eye here, I'm going to delete that. So this is very experimental, and we are making our own compositions out of other people's pixels for the time being. If you did something that you didn't like, you can hit Command Z. And if you do multiple things you don't like, you can use your history, which is right here. And this allows you to go back on default settings 50 steps. But I usually like to change in my preferences. Under performance, I'll use over 200 history states. And I recommend that for you too. So you can change under preferences, performance, how many history states to remember. And I would say between 200 and 300. These computers can handle that. Because sometimes you make a lot of steps in Photoshop without realizing you made a mistake. That allows you to go backwards. Now, one of my favorite things is you can select an area with your lasso, and then you can move that selection between layers. So if I'm on the Garfield layer and I hit delete, it will delete from the tail. But if I'm on the Odie layer and I hit delete, it will delete from the Odie. But I don't need to change my selection, I just need to change my layer. And sometimes you won't know which is the layer you want to delete from, so it's just trial and error going through. All right, let me go to my third layer here. I might hit Command T, and I'll use Command minus to zoom out so I can see it. And now that I've already started to build it a little bit, I might want to reposition it. Like I might want these feet to be up there and fit in that grouping. That's kind of cool. So feel free to, even though you've rasterized them, to use Command T, stretch them, rotate them, turn them again. Then edit as you see fit. I recommend always getting rid of the eyes. So we're really focusing on the lines. And I'm just using a mouse for this because it's not very particular work, but a tablet would help you be able to select kind of more precise shapes should you want to. And don't be afraid to delete a lot. This is your own visual taste we're exploring. And here I'm trying deleting from different layers, see what happens. All right, and I like how these kind of appendages are sticking out. Last one. Now there's a reason we're using a minimum of 5 images. To meet the requirements, please use a minimum of 5 images. And we'll get into the legal reason for that next class. But basically it just forces you to make it your own. You can't be overly dependent on any one image that way. Whereas if you're only combining 3, there's bound to be one dominant image. And that makes it less transformative. So the shortcuts I'm using, Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to zoom out. And then otherwise I'm just only using the lasso tool. I like to simplify my Photoshop use to one tool at a time very often. It speeds things up. It helps me practice, gives me clarity. But I am switching a lot between layers to know what I'm deleting. And I can use the eyeballs next to the layers to see if a particular layer is the one I want. And then I can use the history states as well to go back and change. Now there are lots of different ways to make selections besides just the lasso tool, but the lasso tool is the most basic. It's a good one to start with. And remember that you can carry those selections through multiple layers. All right, last layer. Now this one is a little interesting. It's a much thinner line. It kind of fills it out, makes it a little interesting. I want to get rid of this signature or any writing. Because I'm transforming it, it's going to be my own. I need to rasterize it before I can delete it. And then I see some little things off to the edge. I want to clean those up too, in whatever layer they're in. I think I got it. So always check your edges. Okay, very good. Now I'm going to change this to normal mode. This is because I'm going to show you some other things at the beginning of the next demo that we can do with line art without having to paint anything ourselves to make it our own. So I'll start there next time.